Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Wellness Watch presented by the African American Wellness Project. I am your co-host, Ellis Dean, and we have a wonderful, wonderful show planned for you tonight. We have Miss Beverly Kyer, and she's going to be telling us about her book called Surviving Compassion Fatigue. And when I heard about that, I was like, boy, that is a very descriptive of what some of us that work in helping professions are experiencing. Some of us that are out there trying to continue to be compassionate for our fellow man. There is some compassion fatigue. So I'm interested to learn about what it is and how could we survive and how we're going to overcome it. So I'm looking forward to that conversation, of course, this evening. Also, if you're watching us right now, make sure that you tell us where you're watching from. So put that in the comment section. We like to see where people are watching us from all over the nation. And make sure you share this. If you're enjoying this content, if this is a subject matter or a topic that you'd like to share with your friends, make sure you share and let them know that we're here every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. So when I said earlier I am a co-host, that means there's somebody else that's going to be here with me, and he is the man with plan and the man of the hour, also known as Dr. Michael Lenore. Dr. Lenore, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. A beautiful California evening. The temperature's about 70 degrees, and I'm missing the president's speech for a more important topic.
Absolutely.
So how can you be better? How can you be better than that?
Well, yeah, people are going to make their own little interpretations about his speech anyway. So you can read about it tomorrow and how everybody's chopped it up and interpreted it in their own way on the news channels.
We're so pleased to have Ms. Cryer with us. She's a nationally known speaker in the area of compassion fatigue. Now, I must admit, Ms. Cryer, when we talked to her, that I've been in medicine a long time, and I've not heard, I knew something existed, but I didn't know it had a name, and I didn't know it had experts. And so when I was looking up your book, it seems like a lot of people want to take ownership over compassion fatigue. There are more books on passion fatigue than there are on the COVID virus. And so consequently, I think it would be so exciting for our audience to get familiar with the things that you've been doing and to understand how it relates to them and how it relates to the healthcare system. So, but before that, we have a few news items we want to share with our with our audience. Certainly in the COVID space, there are two big issues. The J&J vaccine is back on the market. It's been looked at by the CDC and Food and Drug Administration. And what they found in 7 million cases where the vaccine has been given, they found 16 cases of a very serious type of thrombosis, mostly in women, mostly under the ages of 50. So they released it with that caveat that if you're a woman under the age of 50, you have a chance to develop this thrombotic situation. It's less than 1 in a million, but when you're talking about your life, what should the odds be? I think it's a good vaccine, no question it's effective. It's a one-shot deal, which is important. Would I, if I hadn't been completely vaccinated, take it under the circumstances that it's being described right now? I think probably so. I think that those risk factors for men, I think, are important, and we need every vaccine that we can get. A lot of people would like to have a one-shot vaccine, and so consequently, I think I would take it if I were a man or a woman who's over 50, and you only want one vaccine. I think this is a good option.
I think it's an important way. Yes, there have been some reported risks. Those risks are extremely low when you're talking about in comparison to the number of people that has actually received the vaccine. I think I heard a statistic one time that said you're more likely to be struck by lightning than to have a reaction to the J&J vaccine. So that's comforting, but of course, that's not comforting to the people or the families that have had the reaction to the vaccine. But I will say that in terms of having a one-dose vaccine available really helps a lot of marginalized communities, a lot of people that don't have the ability to go back twice, whether it's to take time off work or whatnot. You're talking about migrant workers and whatnot, that if you're going to go into certain areas and certain communities, having a 1-dose vaccine is going to be more effective than having people have to wait 3 and 4 weeks to go back to get a second dose. And so I think there's a need for the J&J vaccine in terms of being in circulation, but we do have to monitor and make sure that there's not any additional risks associated with it.
Yeah, the other thing is that they're starting to do research issues on children. And I think eventually by the time school starts, it may be one of the routine vaccines that you give to children if the research pans out. Second issue is around the mask. Yesterday, they freed people from wearing the mask outside. If you're within relatively social distances, still not inside. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be in this mask for a long time. I don't know whether I'm afraid of the virus or I like the Lone Ranger when I was growing up. But one of the two, I'm not taking off my mask for quite some time. Now, I don't care what people, I want somebody to challenge me about that. I think this mask has been a very simple process to protect us from this virus. I also think that I had a better year this year. I don't think I got too many infections, too many colds. And so until, there's herd immunity, if you want to see me, you better peek under that mask because I'm going to have that mask on. But I can understand people. I can understand people who want to give it up. And and they should. Under the circumstances, I think following the science is really important. But for me, the mask is an issue. All right, another issue. Let's get a bit away from the COVID virus because there's other things happening in African American health. One of the landmark studies that was completed this week was a study looking at risk factors for cardiovascular disease. And what they found in the African American population is yes, diet's important, yes, exercise is important, yes, controlling your cholesterol is important, but so is alcohol, so is stress, so is racism. So there are a number of factors that we're seeing in younger people. Cardiovascular disease develop much earlier. Heart attacks are on the increase in African Americans below the age of 50. And it's not the risk factors that we've always talked about have been the same, but they've identified a whole set of kind of social determinant risk factors which seem to be just as important. And it just develops a new method for us to attack this problem. I think finally, we want to talk a bit about diabetes, just seconds, is that the diabetic rates of diabetes are going up in our communities. And it's not on a genetic basis. We all know what does. I'm tired of talking to people about the risk factors of diabetes. They know what the risk factors are. So there's really no need. It's almost patronizing to talk about diet and exercise and all that. You already know that. The problem is, why are we not changing our lifestyles? So many people are still basically overweight. So many people are not exercising. So many people start their children. I always say, you go to McDonald's, you see a 3-year-old can't drive to McDonald's. And then you wonder why 8 or 9 his eating habits are not right. I think we have to start from the bottom up here. We have to start talking to each other about those risk factors that develop into diabetes. No more saying, a little bit of, we know that, everybody knows that. It's time now for us to take action. It's time now for us to step in, step up, talk to our relatives about the risk factors that lead to serious diabetes. They're not genetic. Most of them are now mostly social. This may be a small genetic determinant, but most of them are now, social determinant risk factors. We make sure we don't.
I would say, Doc, on that piece, I think sugar is addictive, right? It should be listed as an addictive substance, right along with alcohol and any other narcotic is available. Because and that's a part. I'm not giving anybody any excuses for that, but sugar is very, very addictive. Those foods that we eat that are increasing or enhancing diabetes, they are also very inexpensive, and they're more readily available than the fresher foods and things like that, especially in particular communities. And so we do have to, when we're talking about this, when we're having this conversation about trying to reduce diabetes and increase heart health care, we have to think holistically. And part of that holistic approach is saying, okay, we've got to be better in terms of what we're purchasing in our communities and what businesses that we allow to come and flourish and that we continue to support in our communities. And we have to tell these chains that have fresher foods and things like that, you've got to be available in our communities. And so we can have other choices other than just, the churches and all the other fast food establishments and convenience stores that are filled with junk food. And so it's too convenient and it's too available to us and it's too affordable to us to be able to just say, hey, we've got to stop. We understand, I think some of us understand the importance of health, but,
Well, yeah, I think we can't ignore some of the social determinants. I mean, we don't get the same health care. We don't have access to the same physicals. I mean, we really don't get the same advice often. We don't get the same medications. But there are things that we can do as an ethnic group that will reduce our risk of diabetes. And we need to be about those. We need to stop talking about it, listening to lectures. I mean, now it's time. We all know mostly about what causes this kind of, I don't think mostly is a word, but about what causes this problem. And so consequently, I think that we really need to start to think about what we can do from the bottom up. What can we do in our own communities? What can we do with our own relatives, our own children? And I think that is the direction we have to start to take now. But I don't want to waste any more time because I'm too excited.
Well, we got one question that was directly for you.
Right. Okay, let's do that.
Report on the screen, and it said, "Did you take the vaccine shot, Dr. Lenore?" This is.
I tried to get all 3 shots. I took the Moderna vaccine early in the game. I didn't have any side effects either from the first or second dose. But I recognize 2 things. There's basically the medical thing. I don't want to die. I don't want to be in the ICU. I don't want to be even in the emergency room with the coronavirus. So getting that vaccine prevents that. Then there's the political piece. What kind of planes you're going to get onto? What college are you going to go to? What sporting events? What entertainment venues are going to let you in without your vaccination? I think it's going to be very, very difficult for you if you're not vaccinated. But more than that, I want to live. And so consequently, if I can take that step, I got vaccinated in January because making anecdotally very short, we were following the virus around, my wife and I. In 2019, we were in December in New York. We were in January on a cruise, and we're in Las Vegas in February. Looks like we were following the virus rather than the virus following us. And so, yes, I got the vaccine, and I'm encouraging everyone to get the vaccine. Those of you who are older seem to be better at getting that vaccine. Talk to your younger people. Those of you who are younger who've gotten the vaccine, talk to your elderly relatives and the older people that you know. So consequently, we're all in on the vaccine. Is there any other questions about what we talked about?
No. That was one specific question. And I know before we shift our conversation to our guest tonight, I wanted to make sure we got that question asked and answered. So it was directly to you. So I just wanted to make sure that got pointed to you. I had the Pfizer. I just got my second dose on Monday, and I didn't have any other than a sore arm. I didn't have any side effects. And I would add one thing to your list of reasonings to get why I got vaccinated. It was for my community and my family, because I know I'm relatively healthy, so my chances of surviving coronavirus are pretty good. But I have in-laws, and my parents are older, and they have other conditions, and so I got it so they could come and visit, and they can feel safe by coming to visit, and us going to visit them. So I did it for my family, my community, to protect them as well.
All right, so let's turn now to our guest, Ms. Beverly Cryer. Is that the way? Am I saying it right? Cryer. Beverly Cryer. And Ms. Cryer, we're going to give you all the time that you need, so don't worry about the clock, because it's unique for me as a physician who's been in this for a long time to hear a term that I knew existed somewhere but couldn't put in context. So let's start with a couple of issues. What is compassion fatigue, and how did you get interested in that?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Lenore and Mr. Dean, for letting me have this opportunity to speak to the communities at large about this subject. It's important to me. I want to tell you first about why it became important. I worked many years ago as a pediatric social worker in oncology, children with cancer and leukemia. I then later went to work with collaboration between the VA Medical Center and Department of Defense, something called Operation Outreach, to be trained to treat veterans who was experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder after the Vietnam War. I worked with veterans for 16 years, and then I went into child welfare 100%. Children who were severely abused, neglected, victimized. I did that for a number of years, about 9 years. And while I'm laying out that platform to say, in all of those years, as much as I was very, very passionate, like all of you are, about your work, committed, dedicated to the work, felt a strong sense of purpose, I never noticed what was happening to me in terms of my exposure to all of that suffering and victimization, all of the pain that my clients experience. And so I suffered heart failure, not once, but twice. I suffered it twice because I didn't learn anything from the first. We have a tendency sometimes, us helpers, to treat our illnesses like it's some kind of luxury. And we feel guilty and we're anxious to get back and continue to do the work, as opposed to paying attention to what's happening in our own bodies. Not even the people who trained us at that time within the Department of Defense, to understand that doing the work would have a personal impact. So that's what made me, after the second heart failure and being grateful that I survived, I decided to build a company to go to the field and train human service providers and caregivers across this nation about the impact of their work and their service to others, working with anybody intensely, children, youth, adults, and seniors who are impacted by their crisis, their traumas, their victimizations, the children with adverse childhood experiences. When we're working with them, we absorb their pain, we're exposed to their tragedies, and therefore we are highly subject to getting compassion fatigue. So that's why I did this, and that's why this is passionate work for me, because I want us to learn, all of us, yourself included, because I know you've been in the field as a doctor for a long time. We still need to learn. It's not to learn that we must take care of ourselves, concurrent to the services we give to others. So compassion fatigue itself is a syndrome that very much mirrors post-traumatic stress disorder. And you know that's always attributed to veterans who's on the battlefield. Yet the scientists, the specialists in the field of trauma, when they're looking at us, the caregivers, the service providers, the helpers, they said that the chemical reaction in our bodies in the execution of our service and caregiving is no different than the chemical reaction of a veteran who's actually in Afghanistan today. And that's something. Of course, they have a very different level of threat to their life and their safety, but the chemistry itself does not make that distinction. It does not make that difference. It just reacts in our bodies. And so we are subject to many of the same symptoms that they have, such as confusion and feeling hopeless or feeling helpless, extreme kind of mood swings, feeling out of order, avoidant issues, behavioral changes that are absolutely dramatic, that could wreck a household, episodes of fear, losses of sleep, all kinds of reports of that nature, and many, many more. That's what the veteran experiences, and that's what we experience as service providers. Now, it is really related to your work, your professional life, your role, whatever it is. I've been working with child welfare agencies and adult protective service agencies and immigration and trafficking and with attorneys and probation workers, all kinds of people in the field, and family caregivers. I don't want to leave them out, because people who are taking care of other people, still I want to say that they rarely count the cost to themselves. And caregivers have been known to get sicker than the people they were taking care of. Whether you're taking care of a family member who's sick, your parents, your children, your spouse, your partners, there may be substance in the house issues or mental health issues. It is a toll on the physicality and the neurology of the person providing the service. So that's your role, but it's also your personal life as well as your professional life that can take you down with compassion fatigue. Now, how this relates also, and it's more expanded with the people in the African American community that are underneath all of that, in the midst of all of that, is the issues, as you mentioned before, of racism and oppression. It's almost like this, whatever degree that we are exposed to racism or aware of racism or having those kinds of issues, incidents that happens to us, is it could be a normalized, kind of internalized, pervasive feeling that is always there. There's always some fear, there's always some concern, there's always some threat. It shows up on your job. It definitely shows up in the healthcare system if you're not with the right people. It shows up in your relationships, in your communities, in your churches. It shows up everywhere. So this significantly compounds compassion fatigue. It exacerbates all of the factors of compassion fatigue. This is the accumulative effect, which results in something we like to call toxic stress syndrome. And that's when we can really get sick.
You know, a lot of people are experiencing this, who are listening to us, who don't really know what they're going through. I can tell you, almost every one of us who has family with older relatives, and I say elderly because I might kind of be in that group, but are taking care of older relatives or taking care of people, our mother, our father. I mean, I've never seen the kind of tension that puts on people. And so when you talk about passion fatigue, I think you're putting a name on something that so many people, regardless of whether they're lay people, taking care of parents or professional people, and even recently doctors are starting to recognize that they have that. So one of the things that I think is important, and you recognize this, what are some of the symptoms of passion fatigue? What are some of the overt and subtle symptoms of this problem?
Well, actually, most people think of the symptoms of compassion fatigue in terms of all the physicalities, and I'll get to that in a moment. But in truth, there's 6 impact areas. And those 6 impact areas are cognition, behavior, your emotions, your interpersonal relationships, your spiritual belief systems, and the physical things. Now, when you look at cognition, you're talking about this periods of confusion and rigidity and self-doubt and spaciness, even trauma imagery where you have flashbacks. Doctors can have, and nurses can have flashbacks of somebody who was suffering and died, and it just kind of shows up while you're sitting at a cookout or a birthday party. Any emotions, the anxiety and the emotional roller coaster, the fear, the depression. What I want to say about depression, we could all, and I think all of us have some degree of a depressed state, not handled to become an actual clinical depression. Survivor's guilt, big time. I was so concerned and in pain about the people, your doctors and nurses and your respiratory people, therapists, all of you people working out there under that COVID situation, particularly when New York, you're in New York that's my home, it became an epicenter. Just the degree, the amount of the devastation, the losses of death, people just, they came apart. They kind of take on some kind of guilt that you couldn't do enough, but you could never do enough to save lives. That's what you went into the profession to do. That injures people significantly. Anger, rage, numbness, and the behavioral things, it changes your life. It just changes your life. You can have nightmares. Many of us, me included, eating disorders. I try to eat the top of the desk when I get really, really distressed. Many of us do that. Moodiness, clinginess. Here's another thing. Hypervigilance and startle alert. Because we know the awful things that could happen to people, we stay ramped up anticipating the next thing that happens. Think about that and all the issues that's going on. Again, that points back to the racism. It's that kind of underlying pervasive fear that something is going to happen. Somebody's not going to make it back home. Does that make sense to you? That's part of the behavioral issues. Sleeping disorders, negative coping, it could be alcoholism, it could be eating, you name it. You name it. We have negative coping skills, mechanisms. I want to say that basically in the Western culture, most of us, there's a few people who don't eat, I don't know them, and I don't want to talk to them. But in the Western society, we consume when we're upset and distressed. In the spiritual realm, we begin to question God, how in the world can this happen? You begin to doubt your sense of purpose. Why am I even doing this? I reached a point when I was working with children dying of cancer and leukemia. I was the only social worker. I began to say, is what I'm doing even mattering anymore?
Right.
It's really even helping anymore. And I know doctors say that to themselves. I know nurses say that to themselves. And on your question about not knowing what's going on, when you're struggling and you don't know what's causing the struggle, we tend to take it on as a personal flaw. You think it's you, but no, it was a chemical reaction going on in your body. In the interpersonal realm, our relationships, they fracture, it could be overprotective, too controlling, mistrust could kick in, our intimate issues kind of fade away, and it has nothing to do with losing love and affection for your partners, whoever they are, or your children. or your children, but that thing goes out with that chemical reaction. You just leave me alone. I don't want to be touched. I don't want to be bothered. But you can work on that. The projection in the brain, the tendency to want to isolate and be alone, our patience that says our window of tolerance for everything that's normal. I'm talking to so many people who are working at home with their children. And I wind up, as much as I'm training, trying to counsel them, don't put your hands on the kids. Their patience is up to here. The married couples, their patience is up to here. The window of tolerance goes down with enough chemical reaction in the body. And then let's talk about the physical, because that's what you asked about. The physical diseases with toxic stress syndrome, they're major. You deal with them all the time, but understand that the stress related, the diabetes, as you said, heart conditions, heart failure is high. People with compassion fatigue, chronic respiratory diseases, and vascular diseases, you say, kidney diseases, strokes. We always talked about strokes in the past, but you understand there's so much more about that. We were accident prone. I could walk through my door that I've been living in this house for 20 years. And when I'm stressed, look at the door jamb moves over and knocks me over. And I fall up the stairs in my house as opposed to down the stairs. You understand? We have accidents on the road, and you know how you walking across the street and you're going to trip. And there's a high incident of suicidal ideation and suicidal actualization. I know you see it all the time. These are some. I just mentioned to you, I think, you correct me, 9 out of the 10 leading causes of death related to stress, related to compassion fatigue, unchecked.
Well, we do have one question that just came in from Lauren. I'll put it on screen here. And basically, I think the impetus of this question is, you're talking about people that are working in helping professions, but she's asking, can a mom experience compassion?
All day long. And let me can I go into another area that you may not have asked me about that? I began my work with family caregivers. I began my work with mothers and fathers and uncles and aunts and grandparents, especially, who were dealing with children who had adverse childhood experiences, had trauma experiences, and children who would be sick. The mothers in the hospital, when I was the social worker in the pediatrics oncology unit, I did more counseling to hold them together than I did to hold the kids. Does that make sense? Yes, you can, because it's constantly there. When you're in a situation where there's trouble and struggles, challenges, illnesses, behaviors, and did I say behaviors? It's chronic, it's cumulative. Your chemical reaction in your body, your stress level goes to the ceiling. It just continues on. Now, let me add something else to mothers in the African-American community, and you know where I'm heading to this. Every time your child walks out the door, especially your sons, are they going to come back?
Yeah,
I've got a 13-year-old son, and I think about that every time something happens on the news and we see another shooting. It's that shared experience that I know he's getting older, he's getting larger, and the older and larger Black men get, the more dangerous America sees them. And so I worry about that every single day that he goes out of this house.
And what you do?
You'll never stop, Mr. Dean. You'll never stop. My son is 50, and I can't breathe without.
Yeah.
And what you do with each part of our conversation is you gather more and more people starting to recognize that they're in this group, that they're starting to recognize that maybe I was on the Friends because I'm taking care of my mom, or maybe I'm in the middle of it because I'm working in a rest home. We often talk about the pandemic as it started with the real first responders, where the Black people who worked in these places and had no idea that this virus was hanging around, and then saw their comrades die. So every time you mention some of these symptoms, it gathers more and more of us into a situation where we really don't know, or understand or appreciate the stress that it puts on us.
Well, like Dr. Lenore, compassion fatigue has wrecked the health of millions before COVID-19. It has broken any household before COVID-19.
Yeah.
It has destroyed home relations, marital relations, relationships with children before COVID-19. I just said that was on top of it. It compounded the situation in a major way. And when this is not going to be over anytime soon, but it will be with us forever unless we know and we are aware of it and we do the work to mitigate the effect. And we got to talk about that because you can.
You know, well, I wonder if when you recognize you have passion fatigue, are there different techniques that you use for different circumstances? I'm particularly as a pediatrician in the stress that having an older family member you have to take care of puts on you. I'm particularly interested as a doctor in people who work in hospitals and nurses and people who work constantly under pressure. Is it all the same issue or are there subsets of it? And is the approach to the management of it the same? Does one size fit all in that situation?
There's some very, very basic sameness in the way it's going to attack the body. It's a given that if you do the work that you do in all of the other groups, parents that I mentioned, you're going to have compassion fatigue. As a matter of fact, the father of compassion, I like to call him the father, but the doctor who constructed the construct, he said, the very qualities of caring and compassion and empathy that allow you to do the work put you in a direct path of compassion fatigue. There's no avoiding it. There's no avoiding it. He says, but then if you understand it as a predictable outcome of your service and caregiving, then what is predictable is preventable. In other words, you know about it. This knowledge that we're putting out today, they need to say to people, okay, it's going to come. So what do? You do everything you can every day, every week to mitigate the effects, to reduce the effects, to lessen the intensity of the stress. See, stress is going to be with us forever, Dr. Lenore. You know that. I'm not telling you anything new. So it just piles up. It's cute. It just stacks. It is one on top of the other because we, and particularly in our community, we don't stop. We push. Things get worse. We dig even deeper.
Yeah.
So we want to learn how not to do that, to do something to stop, several things to stop and re-regulate our central nervous system, to calm ourselves, to decompress ourselves, to unconstrict ourselves so our bodies could maintain some level of coherence so that we could avoid some of the sicknesses that we have. We could offset a lot of that stuff. Lots of techniques. And some of those, incidentally, I'm building an online community. That's not a community, but it's a campus for all of us in the fields to come and kind of push button and learn some of these techniques and strategies. Some of those are traditional techniques that we know about, and some of them are more the ancestrals. Obviously, things like meditation and calmness and walking and stretching, kinds of self-care habits like that, tends to relax, the tapping, the EFT, the chimes, prayer. It's a really, really important thing to do. There's some other things I do like visualization, and I'm a real strong advocate of mindfulness exercises and practices, just to calm. And actually we could teach people, and they could teach the members of their household how to do the things just to calm, soothe the nerves, and re-regulate the body. And I want to emphasize that. It's a chemical reaction that goes off instantly with any stressor. It goes to certain places. One of the places it goes down and knocks out our capacity. I shouldn't say knocks out. It hijacks our capacity to think critically, rationally, problem solve, short-term memory. That sends a communication to another part of the brain. How we feel, how we think, and ultimately how we're going to behave, which usually will kind of put us in a reactive kind of state as opposed to being more reflective. At the same time, that chemical goes down the neurocircuitry into what a gut reaction. The body gets constricted. And when it gets constricted and gets tightened, all of our systems, every system and organ gets compromised in the body. Yet, what you ask, there are techniques and strategies to unconstrict, get some flow, so things will begin to work well in the body as well as they can until you have time to do something more substantial. One of the most immediate and available things to do is a deep, rhythmic kind of breath to allow enough nitric oxide back into the capillaries so they can expand and you can kind of get some more blood flow going. But there's lots of techniques, and that's in the book, but there's also going to be on that campus, and I talk about those on my broadcast. I'll be stay in touch, and I hope you come back on yours and teach some more. But that's some of the do.
Well, I'm going to say this: our audience right now is loving you. The guest is Beverly Kyer. The book is Surviving compassion fatigue. I have put the link in the comment section, the Amazon link. And so please, 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 if you are enjoying what you're hearing tonight, and by your comments, I know that you are, because I know I am. I know I'm getting some of it. When you listed those symptoms earlier, I was like, I got the whole list of the symptoms, from the drinking to the intimacy to the hypervigilance to all of those things that you just described my daily life. And so I've got to do a better job. So I'm going to download the book. I'm going to get the book myself and read it. And I encourage everybody to go do it. It's Surviving Compassion Fatigue. And so please, please, please go get that book. I want to hear some more. We got to get some more, but I wanted to make sure that we let people know how they can get your book, what the name of your book is, and they can get it so they can find out what's going on with them, what's happening with us. Because I didn't know. I knew something was wrong, something was off, and you hit the nail on the head. So please, please keep sharing with our audience right now.
Yeah, and you were telling us, you were talking about the techniques that we can use, but Glenn, I think it was good he stopped to let people know how they can get more information, because even though I thought we had a lot of time, it seems like we're running out of it. I mean, we have more time, but it looks like we will probably, no matter what we do, need more. But tell us some of the other techniques that we can use to kind of deal with this once it's recognized.
Well, the techniques are important in this way. There's a whole lot of tools for the road, but one of the things it's a number of things that's really important, is that we need to learn as a people to talk and process and integrate what is happening to us, as opposed to holding that in, stuffing it in, and letting it fester. That is critical to do. And I have like my 3 R's. I want us to learn to release, let it out, get it off your chest, ain't got to be no long drawn out thing. I want us to reboot, use those techniques. In addition to that, there's things like arts and craft and playing and mindfulness and journaling, creative kind of writing, listening to music, putting your hands in clay, putting your hands in soil. But the body things, it tends to relax the body movement. Even things like dance is just powerful to release and to get the chemical under control. I want to say this too, if you allow me, if you have a little bit more time. There's 2 clinical terms for compassion fatigue. And when I'm talking to you about talking about it, I want, first of all, for us to ask for help. And I want us to offer help when we see our colleagues, our friends, our neighbors in trouble. And this goes 2 ways. It's important to know what they're struggling with. The clinical terms for compassion fatigue are secondary trauma and vicarious trauma, and they manifest different. The secondary trauma is when you get input, you hear news, you see news on the TV related to something awful that is happening to somebody else, something in the community, something across the nation, like a mass shooting, a kidnapping, police shoot, another shoot, domestic violence, all the COVID deaths. Whatever you hear and get that input, we feel something. We feel pain, grief, outrage, horrified, anger in behalf of somebody else. That's it. You slip into compassion fatigue. Also, the vicarious traumatization has a more cognitive nature, in that we are so exposed to the horrors, the unfairness, the oppression, the murders, the harm to people, the sicknesses to people, the unfairness to people, the cruelties to people, and that exposure, we absorb it. And that's part of what keeps us so alert and so ramped up. The unfortunate thing about anybody related to oppression, there's a part of you that's always hypervigilant, startle alert, startle response. And that chemical reaction is making us sick. We have to learn to code switch, get into right brain activities. The left brain, your logic, your reason, your rationalization, oral expressive language, that's important for us. But that's not the sole way to operate. And I want to say that to some of my doctor friends and nurses, because you stay kind of like in that clinical arena, but sometimes you need to, because and you're struggling to save somebody's life, but to stay in that mode of struggling, trying to make sense out of what don't make no doggone sense, that kind of puts you in a place. Code switch as often as you can to right brain activities, which is a different set of chemistry, like serotonin and endorphins and dopamines that lifts you, lets you see possibilities, gives you hope. That's the part of you that has a appreciation for color, for art, for music, for beauty, for form, intuition and imagination. We need to do that. That also is an enormous help to the human body, the human spirit, the human mind.
We have a
We do have a question. We have a question here from the audience. This is from Lauren, and she's asking, "How do I recognize when my spouse is experiencing compassion fatigue, and what should I do?"
It depends on what your spouse is doing, but I gotta say, no matter how difficult it is to notice it, don't tell him what it is. Don't tell her what it is. Say, I noticed something. And I see you, I sense you, I feel in my heart that you're struggling. I just want you to know that you could talk to me about anything. Don't try to defend anything. Don't try to qualify anything, because many of us still, we have a hard time, and especially if it's men and sometimes firstborn daughters, they don't wish to acknowledge a vulnerability. But encourage them, talk to me, and say to them that being vulnerable, if that's the case, that's not a weakness. It is wise to acknowledge that you're a powerful, strong, dynamic person in bodies and minds that can be fractured and injured by all you face. Just acknowledge what they're doing. Acknowledge that you appreciate that they're trying, and you realize and you can see that it's hurting, it's pulling on them. Sometimes just ask, what came up for you? And then be quiet and give them the time to decide if they want to answer. But keep the door open for them to talk, and say, if you don't want to talk to me, you can talk to so-and-so, you can talk to so-and-so, whatever the case is, but encourage them to open up. See, we lost 57,000 veterans who came home from that war and was quiet, didn't say anything, and it killed them. That still happens in our communities today. Encourage them to open up and make it safe for them to do it without judgment. I hope that helps.
Yeah, well,
it helped me. So I'm telling you, this has been a wonderful, wonderful discussion. This has been a great. If you're just joining us, yes, I'm answering people in the comment section. This show, this broadcast is going to be available across the networks on the African American Wellness Project. It's going to be a podcast on Black Doctors Speak. It is also going to be housed on the blackdoctor.org Facebook page, as well as the blackdoctor.org YouTube channel. So you can just click that YouTube link and share it with your friends and family if you want to get them this information. This is wonderful, but make sure that this broadcast is 45 minutes, an hour long, but you need to get the book, because the book is going to give you the information that you can go back and reference, and that is Overcoming Compassion Fatigue.
It's Surviving Compassion Fatigue.
I'm sorry.
And I dropped the price to about half price. It's on Amazon. Surviving Compassion Fatigue. Help for those who help others.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your own journey through compassion fatigue, and tell us a little bit about the company you built and the services they provide.
Well, as I said, I did some work. I seem to have been called, like many of you, to work with people who are really struggling with crisis, challenges, chaos in their lives, and a lot of victimization. I had witnessed a lot of horror, but I knew I was able to add a measure of comfort to help. And so I felt very passionate, very purpose. I really wanted to get to work and do the work. And under that kind of lens that I had, no one ever told us that it was going to get us. It's going to knock you to the knees, knock the wind out of you. And on occasion, when I could feel myself really struggling, my cognition got in trouble, my memory got in trouble, my focus got in trouble, my mood, my stuff got in trouble. Matter of fact, I used to come home to my kids and they came running to the door to hug me, and I wanted them to just get away. And my poor husband, he was to move fast enough. All that stuff was happening to me too, because I did not know. I thought something was wrong with me. I even considered leaving the work because I thought it. But then I met Brian Post. Y'all need to meet him one day. He talked to me about compassion fatigue, and that, just like you, Mr. Dean, it opened up my eyes. But by then I had so damaged my health that I still went down. And then I went down the second time. But since I've been doing that work, and I built this company, I started working with family caregivers. I want you to know that. Mothers and fathers and uncles and aunts and grandparents, taking care of family members and community members. And I really was making a target to get to people in the professions who are doing the help, including your folks there. Did some marketing to do that. But once it was showing that it was saving staff, reducing staff turnover, staff sickness, workman compensation issues, staff conflicts, mood disorders, low morale, and all that, the apathy on the job, the withdrawal, the loss of confidence in even doing your job, then people said, get this woman, get this information from somebody to help us understand what's happening to our people, because we can create the kind of work environments, and you can do that at your home too, that encourages, forces wellness, self-care habits, self-care practices that you do consistently. And there's another thing about our African American community: we do not practice consistent self-care, but that's part of the learning to understand that you could do that. And when those agencies began to do it, my work just blew up, it just grew. And after COVID-19, it doubled. So that's what happened. But there's basically no agency of service provider that I don't work with at this point. They're getting it. They're getting it, and it's making a difference. And I'm still trying to reach out to more. As a matter of fact, during the height of the epicenter experience in New York City, I was reaching out to nurses and doctors who were at the bedside of that massive loss of life. We step away, and I'm telling you to do this sometimes too. And I know the work can be kind of chronic, and it just keeps coming and coming and coming. But it's good to step away from the bed, maybe walk to the hall, walk to the steps, go hide in the bathroom for a minute, and spend 120 seconds, 2 minutes, 3 minutes to breathe and decompress. Maybe to cry, scream, and cuss for a moment. But to step away and just regulate. See, we are dysregulated or regulated. Regulated means that you can manage all the stresses you face every day within a window of tolerance. But a dysregulated state, the same stresses, you're outside of your window of tolerance, and your body is under constant assault. But understand that that's the case. In your work, you're dysregulated most of the time. So your effort is always to work on regulating and calming yourself. And you don't wait till the end of the day, and you don't wait for Saturday or the next holiday. You do it intermittently several times a day. And believe it or not, the effectiveness and the productivity and the quality of your work will be relevant. You're not taken away to step away. You just got to figure out how to do that. Strategize with each other.
Well, I think that this has been, there's so much that you could tell us. And so
we got to have her back. We got to have her back.
And my feeling is that just giving people the permission to recognize what's going on, and some of the resources that you have to help them navigate through this process. This whole thing has been very meaningful. I mean, I'm starting to realize now that this is a problem for even, for those of us who have been around for a long time. We refuse to let us think like this. We refuse to let us believe that these things were too much, because we were never taught to deal with it this way. I think your description and your call to action is very much appreciated by our audience, and we certainly will have you back in a more limited discussion. We'll put all your information in the chat box so that people know how to get in touch with you, and we will certainly invite you back to join us on the Wellness Watch.
Thank you, Dr. Lenore, and thank you, Mr. Dean. It has really been a pleasure. You can see I get very excited about that. So it's
the pleasure has been all ours. People are already buying your book right now. They've already gone online and buying your book. The pleasure has been ours. Ms. Kaya, you have really blessed my day. It's been a long day for me, so this has been a blessing for me as a co-host. I don't know, I'm not supposed to be taking it's for the audience, but thank you so much.
You're going to have to take Mr. Dean offline and give him some emergency therapy.
You know how to reach.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. All right, I want to thank the audience for participating and with Ms. Kaya, and we appreciate her joining us. Now, next week, we'll be talking about everything urologic. That means we're going to talk about the kidneys, we're going to talk about the sex organs, we're going to talk about, not being able to urinate, not being able to function. Talk a little bit about prostate cancer with urologist Lawad Langford will be our guest. Other times, we'll have an update on the news. So we want you to learn to join us each week and to start forming your questions early enough. We'll have our promotional stuff up there so you know what we're talking about. But this was a very revealing 40 minutes, 45 minutes, Mr. Dean. I want people to remember that health is their biggest asset. And we'll see them next week.